as people approach burnout, they become less aware of it.
Burnout is so costly. Any kind of stress and anxiety is costly, but burnout is so exceptionally costly to performance.
As people get close to burnout, they often double down on the things that have led to burnout in the first place.
You can apply these tools to make yourself more resilient to the stress. I thought we'd start with a tweet I saw on your timeline just a few weeks ago. There are two types of people in the world: those who are burnt out and those who don't know they're burnt out.
Yeah, I mean, really, this is it. You want to be in the category of knowing about it. Because one of the interesting things I came across in my research for the new book is that as people approach burnout, they become less aware of it. Because the things that burnout leads you to being a bit cluttered, a bit foggy in your thinking across your whole life, well, it includes your thinking about your self-awareness. So as people get close to burnout, they often double down on the things that have led to burnout in the first place. They think, well, things aren't going the way I want them to go. I better double down. I better work even harder, even longer, even more Zoom meetings, even more relentlessly. And so it just produces more and more of the same. And right now, I mean, everywhere I go, everyone I'm talking to, this is what the underlying message is. Everyone's burned out.
Of course, over the last 12 to 14 months or so, there have been some quite unique pressures on us. A lot of restrictions have been placed upon us, factors outside our control. So lots of those natural release mechanisms that we typically would have, seeing friends, going out for meals, going to concerts, they've not been there. And clearly this has played into more of us feeling burnt out. But there's also something about this societal narrative that we grow up with that just sort of infuses our culture, which is we always need to do more, so that if we ever stop, if we want to, smell the roses, listen to the birds in the garden, it's almost as if there's a monkey on our back telling us that, no, we can't stop. We've got to do more, be more productive. And I think you sort of beautifully summarize this on page 7 of your book, which, if you don't mind, I'd love to read out. Strangely, some of us respond to feeling exhausted and overwhelmed by vowing to work even harder and longer. It doesn't help that our culture glorifies burnout as a measure of success and self-worth. The implicit message is that if we aren't perpetually exhausted, we must not be doing enough.
I mean, if you say it succinctly, burnout is not a badge of honor. It's something we have got to, maybe we can't take responsibility for the whole of society, but individually we can say, look, I'm done playing that game. We've been sold a bill of goods, and it's time to take responsibility for this and to recognize that we can protect the asset, that we need to protect the asset that is us, that we need to be careful not to just thoughtlessly get into these Zoom, eat, sleep, repeat cycles where people barely know even what day it is, where they just, it is literally endless. Days just seem to flow into each other, and there's no sense of boundaries. Whatever boundaries existed before the pandemic, and I don't think there were many boundaries there dividing work and personal life and health, but whatever they were, now I think they're completely obliterated. And this is why people say, well, I'm not working from home, I'm living at work. That tells you where things were, where the balance of power was before, and it's just accelerated now. So we have to do some things to try to avoid this just burnout as a lifestyle, that we can reclaim our life, take our life back and say, let's say, for example, let's start with having a done for the day list, where you say, I'm not just going to have an endless to-do list, and I'm not going to have my inbox be my default to-do list so that, again, it just is perpetually flowing to us. I'm actually going to make a list at the beginning of the day these are the things that really matter today. And when I'm done with them, I'm done. That I'm not going to carry on after that. I'm going to create space after it to relax, to recuperate, so that I can slingshot into the next day and feel that energy because we've got a good rhythm of life going on.
Yeah. The done for the day list is, it's like many of the tips in the books. It's very, very simple, very, very practical. But, like a lot of these truths, there's that deceptive simplicity with them. They're sort of obvious afterwards, but beforehand, you don't really get just how powerful it can be. So is this something you do on a daily basis? And if so, what impact has it had on your life?
Yeah, I want to do it every day, but I don't do it every day yet. And I notice there's a real difference in my experience when I do and when I don't. So when I do it, first of all, you have to be thoughtful about your day. There's a forcing function because you say, well, there's so many things I'd like to achieve. The list cannot be everything you wish could be done today. So you have to really be thoughtful and say, well, which are the things that would be most satisfying? So if I get even 3 of these things of my bigger list done, I would go, yeah, that was 3 important things got done today. That's the first difference, is that I'm being more intentional and designful going into the day. The second thing I noticed that's different is the experience of the day is different. So yes, you still have all the same inputs coming in, but instead of just reacting to all of it, I feel calmer as I'm going through it. It's easier for me, a little easier for me to navigate all of those different responsibilities. When I don't do it, the default is living in the inbox. The default is just reacting to all these things going on, and so the experience of life deteriorates. It becomes more frenetic and frantic, and so I'm on my way. I'm definitely a work in progress. This everything in essentialism and everything in effortless that I violate, sometimes and plenty of times. So I feel like I am on this ongoing journey. I'm in it with everyone else to just try and figure out how to make life a little easier, especially how to make the things that matter most a little easier.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons a done for the day list is so important is because these days our to-do lists are never done. Right? There's always something else to do. You could be completing your last task of the day at work, and another email could come in from somewhere on the planet, from someone else on a different time zone, and you've got something else to attend to. So unless you define the end, there will not be an end, which is clearly one of the main problems these days. We don't have those boundaries. We don't have those endpoints. So our work bleeds into our evenings, our weekends, and into our relationships. Greg, I really want to go from the beginning with you because actually I think a lot of my community, a lot of my listeners may not be familiar with your work. I think your 2 books are beautiful companions of each other. I've got to say, when I read your first book a few years ago, I thought it was a complete work. I didn't think it needed a companion, but I think Effortless is a beautiful companion to it. I'm now, as we speak, in my brand new podcast studio, and I hope very soon to have a lot more face-to-face conversations in here. Now, the reason I'm sharing that is because in here, I'm going to have 2 quotes up on the wall. One is a Viktor Frankl quote that I love, but the other one, and it arrives on Friday, is one of your quotes. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. Every time I read that quote, every time I see it written down, it really speaks to me deep within my core. And I think in many ways, that quote sums up all of your work.
Well, it's a high compliment that you're putting it on the wall, and of course I'm seeking to live that myself as well, and struggling along with the rest of us. that lesson grew out of one of my many errors in this journey. I received an email from my boss at the time that said Friday between 1 and 2 p.m. would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby, because I need to be at this client meeting. And I go to we go to the hospital. We're in our daughter is born in the early hours of Friday morning. And instead of being focused on what was the most essential thing that was happening that day, the clear priority, I was feeling torn. I had my laptop out, I had my phone out, and I'm trying to keep everybody happy in all these different requests. And to my shame, I went to the meeting. I was picked up, from the hospital by my manager and taken to the meeting. So, get there, go through the meeting. Afterwards, they said, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made. And the look on their faces didn't evince that sort of respect. But even if they had, it's clear that I made a fool's bargain, that I violated something much more important for something much less important. And that's where that simple lesson came from, as you said it. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And that really set me off on a quest to understand better why is it that we make the decisions we do. And I have found, even before the pandemic, found that people were feeling stretched too thin at work or at home, that they felt busy but not necessarily productive, and that they lived in this sense of the day being hijacked by other people's agenda for them. Yeah. And so essentialism grew out of this research. And if you had to summarize it in one word, it's prioritization. Yeah, it's taking responsibility for that. And then effortless grew out of other experiences. And if you had to summarize that in one word, it's simplification. And so I think you can read either book separately, and have some value in it, I hope. But, and this is a very presumptuous metaphor to use, but it's a little like sort of Paul McCartney and John Lennon. It's like, they both made music separately, but the magic was when they made music together in the Beatles. And I hope at least there's some kind of multiplication effect between these two books, that as people prioritize and simplify, that they can create a different kind of experience, a different way of living. And that's certainly what I'm personally striving for in my life.
If we go back to that moment on that Friday, right? It's many years ago now. But on that day, look, I didn't know you back then, but I imagine that you were a loving husband who dearly loved his wife, as you do now. I imagine that you were a conscientious colleague, worker in your job, like many of us feel. Yet on that day, despite your love for your wife, despite your desire to be in the hospital, you made a different decision. What's going on there? What is the trap that you fell into that so many of us also fall into?
I think, I don't think it's primarily like a motivation problem. Yes, Anna's like the most amazing person to be, love being married, love her, of course, want to prioritize her. It's the moment of our daughter's birth. You can't, that moment is itself a sort of unparalleled experience. Your love for that child is you have that instant sensation of like, I would do, you wouldn't even think twice of giving up your life for their life. I mean, those are all real. The challenge, I think, is to treat competing priorities as somehow equally valuable. It's where you start to say it's all essential, it's all important, it's all a priority. This is one of my favorite little sort of tidbits of research, but the word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. And according to Peter Drucker, it stayed singular for the next 500 years. So it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution where people started speaking with no sense of irony at all, saying, here are my 34 priorities. And they all have to be done now or even yesterday. And so that shift in our language, I think, illustrates a weakness in our thinking, in our logic, that says, look, if I can just fit it all in, somehow I can have it all. If I treat everything as important, then it will all work out. And in fact, life isn't even close to, that doesn't approximate reality at all. What is far closer to reality is that a few things are essential and almost everything is trivial noise. And so it's more like waking up. You've spent your whole life thinking you were in a, and I don't say this in any way disparaging, but you think you're in a coal mine, and you've lived your life in that way. It's just productivity, get more stuff done. And then you wake up and you say, I've never been in a coal mine. It's all the time. It's been a diamond mine. And so actually my whole job is different than I thought it was. The whole job of life is different. It is to actually explore what is essential, find those diamonds. That's the most important thing. All the rest doesn't matter. Find those things, invest in them, protect those things. And we know that this approximates reality because when people look from anything like a long-term perspective, they recognize that only a few things mattered. At the very end of people's lives, when they're looking at the totality of their life, they don't say, oh my goodness, I wish I'd spent more time on email. Oh, I wish I'd spent more time, on social media and so on. And no one thinks that. No one says that. They can see with a bit more perspective, a few things mattered. And I lost that perspective in that moment, and in an attempt to try and just sort of keep everyone happy and deal with all those pressures. So it's the job of life is to figure out the essential few, to eliminate the non-essential, and then to make it and design it so that the essential things happen as automatically and as easily as possible, so that you don't have to use extraordinary or superhuman effort to make sure you remember the essential things and do them. You want the default to be the essential things.
As I think about your work and, where do I see people commenting on this on social media? A lot of it has been people in the business world or the productivity world. But I actually think your work goes far beyond that, because what you're asking, what you're writing about are fundamentally existential human questions. And actually, I think there's almost a spiritual undertone. I think that on one level, you need self-awareness to be able to apply the principles in your books. But at the same time, I think simply by applying those principles in your life is going to give you a lot of self-awareness. So I think it works both ways. And, I can't help shake the feeling that these principles are going to be just as relevant for, I don't know, let's say a single mum in her life trying to bring up her children, trying to make ends meet. Maybe there's a lot of struggle in her life. I think these principles could really help her as well. So, I'd love to understand your perspective on this.
Well, I don't feel like either books I'm asking a business question. I'm asking a human question. And I also think those human questions are relevant to businesses because all businesses are just humans trying to figure out how to serve other humans. So, it applies there as well. But I think it really is human first questions, as you say. And I actually do think that a deeper reading of Essentialism and Effortless is about your spiritual life and about what is guiding you. As a friend of mine put it, are you being led by your scared self or your sacred self? The scared self will tend to operate in a certain way, endlessly the fear of missing out and what other people are doing and competing and comparing and living in that state. But the sacred self will guide you differently. And so asking better questions will help reveal better answers. I'm thinking now of somebody, of a working mum in England who reached out to tell me her story. So she, after reading, some of the stuff I'd written, started asking this question every day: what is the most important thing I need to do today? That's it. Simple question. But she asked it every day. She wrote it up and she asked it every day. At first, the answers she got were to do with the business that she was trying to run. Which key client to work with, what project was due, and so on. But over time, the answers evolved as she evolved.
Yeah.
And it became, self-care. You need to sleep better because you're not sleeping enough. You're not protecting yourself. You are burning yourself out. But then one day she gets a call from her dad, and he said, look, nothing to alarm you here. Mum's in the hospital again. It's nothing serious. Just wanted to keep you in the loop. And she said in that moment, as she asked the question that day, she knew exactly what the answer was. It was so clear to her. It was almost like time stood still, and like she remembers the weather and the room she was in, and she just knew she had to go to the hospital that day. That was the priority.
Yeah.
And so she did. Now that's like a 2-hour drive. So she's really committing the rest of her day to this. It's not a completely trivial, I'll just go across the street for 10 minutes thing. And she goes and she sees her mum. She says, "Mum, I love you. I'm glad to be here." Mother says, "Oh, I love you too." An hour after that conversation, her mother falls into a coma. And very unfortunately, never recovers from that. A week later, Joe has the unfortunate job of turning off the life support machine. And she reached out to me, just wrote to me to tell the story, because she said, if I had not been an essentialist that day, how differently things would have worked out. I wouldn't have had that moment. I would have missed that and for something inane. And so that was to me a very encouraging moment because, I felt like, I can't change the hospital moment, but for her, she was able to make a better trade-off. And so as people ask better questions, as they change and evolve, the answers will change and evolve. And so I do think that essentialism and now effortless can help people go in different levels when they're ready, as they're ready. And that's what I'm going for. It's beyond just business.
I guess it's like any skill, the more you do it, especially if you're intentional each time you do it, you're getting better at it. So the question you may ask yourself on Monday of, the first Monday of 2020, the first Monday of 2021, you are going to be a much better skilled person at answering that same question if you've been practicing it. So, obviously, Greg, you have written these two wonderful books. What is the most essential thing for you to do in any given day?
That does change from day to day, because what matters is what's important now. And that's a nice acronym, I think. The acronym is WIN. What you've got to win this day. And that means getting clear each day. And it does change it depending on the circumstances. Today in this conversation, the most important thing today is my relationship with my wife, Anna. And maybe that should be true every day, but it feels true today. There's lots of things going on, and making sure that today I actually create enough space for us to go on a walk. We don't do that every day. Sometimes through the pandemic, we got to the point where it was pretty much every day, and it really mattered. No agenda, just listening, sharing, talking, and that became a really important practice. But when that isn't happening every day, it doesn't work as well. And so to me, that would be the priority today. So that, again, doesn't mean that it's the only thing you do today or the only thing I need to do. It's not my only responsibility. But knowing that at the beginning of the day means that I can try to, design the day differently. When the trade-offs come up, I can make the trade-offs differently. And so that would be my answer today. That isn't the answer every day, but it is today.
What I love about that answer, Greg, is there's a flexibility within it. That there's not this kind of rigidity that we can then feel chained to that answer. Oh, I said the most essential thing was for me to meditate for 20 minutes every day, but today I don't have time and I can't do it. I think sometimes when we are trying to better our lives and better ourselves, we can go to these extremes. I certainly know I've been guilty of that in the past. And it's something I feel I'm sort of evolving in my own practice of prioritization, of essentialism, of self-care, is actually, you know what? I feel I can change things from day to day depending on what my needs are on any given day. So I really like that flexibility that's sort of built into the way you answered that.
Well, I've been on this 7-year listening tour. It's been the most extraordinary opportunity to listen to people, literally the world over, talk to me about what is essential for them and what the challenges are for them to live that in practice. And one of the things that has been like an endless theme is the assumption that the essential things not even have to be, the essential things are the very hardest things to do. And I've found that a little confusing at times, especially when I've heard it so often, because what it feels like people are doing is they're taking essentialism and they're saying, well, I need to be a perfectionist about it. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like a very essentialist way to become an essentialist. But it's like they've got this new language, this new, relatively new idea to them. And then they're bringing a bunch of old ideas to how to change to it. Yeah. In fact, one person told me one day, they said, I loved essentialism, but it should come with a warning. This will be the hardest thing that you will ever do. And it really, especially in hindsight, I listen to that and I think, that just means we're going about it wrong. There's a different way to do this. So even after somebody says, I'm really committed now to pursue what matters most in my life, you've got to, it's literally now, I see it as equally important to say, well, what's the right way to do it? Yeah. If you try to do the essential things, the right things, but do them in the wrong way, you'll still be burned out. In fact, you still be discouraged and maybe even more discouraged than before because you're so aware of all the gap between where you are and where you want to be and what's essential and what's not essential. And so when I now think about essentialism, I'm thinking of it as a lifestyle, a way of living, a way of being. And so the way we do it really matters and being careful not to beat ourselves up because we haven't achieved some idealistic state that we've identified for ourselves immediately. It is important. The courage to be rubbish, for example, is something that I now hold as quite sacred in its own right. The idea of like, oh, I'm going to be an essentialist in some mistake-free way. I'm going to just be perfect at this. What a nonsense. What an unhelpful idea. What a way to exhaust yourself, depress yourself, even in the act of trying to be better. And so if you can get out of that and say, how could it be easier? Is there a gentler way to pursue the things that are essential? What if I could get out of the no pain, no gain mantra?
That idea that you prioritize what's important in your life, but you're going about it the wrong way, I think it's very novel. It's very fresh. It's one of the core ideas, I think, that certainly I gleaned from your new book, Effortless, is that, the way you do it is just as important as the prioritization. Do you hear that this gets misunderstood? And have you got any examples of people who have prioritized, but they've gone about their priority in the wrong way?
Yeah, absolutely. This is it. When I say it's what I hear from people, I don't mean like, oh, every so often I hear it from people. I hear it all the time, absolutely all the time, but not in the way it might sound like I'm saying. It's not like people explicitly just say, yes, I tried to prioritize, but I'm doing it the wrong way. Or I tried to prioritize and it's just so hard. It's not even that. It's like this. It's like I just started a new, asked to be on a committee. And the person who was initiating this group said, is their concluding speech as they were launching this thing, they just said, Now, this is so important what we're doing. This could help millions of youth around the world. This could just be so beneficial. It's going to be hard. I mean, it's going to be really hard, but it's going to be worth it. And that, no one challenged it. Nobody said anything about it. I've heard those speeches and conversations like it everywhere. It's everywhere. It's like embedded as a dominant assumption that's just invisible to people. People just believe the essential stuff is the hard stuff. The trivial stuff is the easy stuff. And those are your options. I was just talking to somebody who's trained in the military. I mean, this yesterday or day before. And when he was being trained in the military, one of his, leaders said to him, listen, you can either do it the easy way, which is the wrong way, or you can do it the hard way, and that's the right way. It was like these two options. Well, it's a false dichotomy. Of course, there are times that the right way is the hard way, and the easy way is the wrong way. Of course, that can be true. But is it not possible there's a third alternative? What would it mean? What would it mean if you could find a way to make the most essential things in your life the easiest things?
Yeah.
Or at least just so much more doable than they were in the past. The consequence would change everything. It does change everything, because suddenly you'll do it and you'll do it consistently, because it isn't so costly to take that path.
Yeah, I mean, not only is it going to be more enjoyable to experience life on a day-to-day basis if it feels easy or effortless, but it's also going to be more effective. I know we have a mutual friend in BJ Fogg. I know BJ was on your podcast recently. And, me and BJ have had multiple conversations about this, about, you make something easy, people will do it. So in terms of habit change, we want to make things that we want to do easy. And you were kind of saying a very similar thing in a slightly different arena, that whatever the essential thing is in your life, if you can make it easier and feel effortless, it's much more likely that you're going to do the thing that you've already identified is the priority thing for you to do.
Totally. What happens is that people identify what is essential. They know most people have a sense, at least, even if they haven't been very clear about it, and maybe they ought to be, but they have a sense of the things that are really important that they're not getting to. And they just are in this endless loop. They just think about that essential thing. They feel guilty about it. It overwhelms them. So then they just jump into the dark playground of social media, of TV, of something else that's trivial and appears easy to them. And they just jump back and forth between those two things. They intermittently do the thing that's essential. It's too hard, it's too much, it just exhausts them, it overwhelms them, and then they jump back into something else. And this can happen sometimes, multiple times on the same day, but often what I find is that people they start to, and it reinforces, by the way, the sensation, the belief rather, that the essential thing must be incredibly hard, because why else aren't I doing it? Exercise must be hard. How many people have I talked to about exercise who like, I tried to take up running and every so often I go back to it. Well, do you love running? No, I hate running. I hate it, but I have to do it. Well, why don't we just find a different way? What if there's something else that you like to, do you like swimming? Oh, I like swimming. Well, let's do that then. Like, let's find let's not distrust the easy.
This idea of effortless, and that the things that we love, the things that we want to do, can feel easy and effortless, really is a narrative that is swimming against the tide of the common popular, I was going to say Western narrative, but I think it's everywhere. That narrative that anything good has to be hard. What is it? Nothing good comes easy. You'll never get anywhere in life if you don't work hard. Right? We're sort of surrounded by this. I mean, you've got kids. Your kids are a bit older than my kids. Mine are currently sort of 10 and 8. But even at that age, you see this kind of narrative being, I don't think with any malice. It's I think everyone feels that that's the way to succeed in life. You have to work hard. And I'm not sure you're not saying You don't need to work hard. In fact, what are you saying? For people who might sort of misinterpret that, what are you saying? Because you're not saying never work hard, are you?
Well, I believe in work, and I have 4 children, aged 18 to 12. And of course, we want them to work. We want them to be productive. We want them to take initiative. We value that. We don't want them to be spoiled. All of those things are real, and our children have many responsibilities in our home. But let's give an example. So, we have a whole series of rituals around eating together. Not maybe every night, but most nights. And so we'll raise a glass to each other kind of experience. We'll cheer each other on. A lot of fun in those conversations. But our trouble happens afterwards, which is the dinner cleanup. Well, what do you do now? That my children are just like silent ninjas. They're just gone. I'll turn around and all 4 of them have like quietly slipped off to a room to whatever. And then my job is cat and mouse trying to get them back to do the cleanup. And so basically this is a chore. Now, how do you handle that? What do? You can say, well, look, life is hard and you just have to do the hard things. And that's one approach. And that is a speech that I have definitely had. But what if you could change the experience? What if you could turn it into a ritual? A ritual is a little different than a habit. A ritual is like a habit with a soul. A habit is like what you do. A ritual is how you do it. And so we said, okay, well, at first I said, well, we'll try and make it effortless by dividing up responsibilities really clearly. What does done look like? For the cleanup in the kitchen. Okay, that matters. Dividing up roles and responsibilities. Who is doing what? That mattered. But really, it wasn't until one of my children, my eldest daughter, added music. She just put on like basically karaoke music loud in the kitchen. And that just was like the tipping point moment. So as soon as and even now, if we forget that ingredient, it just is back to drudgery. It's back to like, yeah, well, it's important, but it's hard. And as soon as someone puts on the right music, it just changes it. Someone starts singing, and the feeling changes, and people want to be there, and they want to be part of the little party, and the work gets done. That to me is an illustration of the difference here. So what if you didn't just have to endure the essentials? Oh, it's just harder, just push and so on, and relentless. What if you could enjoy it? What if you can make it into something that the experience of life is better? Then the important things get done, and you've built relationships rather than burned them down a bit.
Burnout, we've discovered, which is really common to executives today, to everybody today, I think, especially post-COVID. We found that if you have sort of a regular active recovery protocol in place, meaning like you don't finish work and drink a beer and watch television. You finish work and go for a long walk in nature, or take an Epsom salt bath, or restorative yoga, or infrared sauna, or get a massage, or be smart about it. So there's a recovery and regular access to flow. Those 2 things, and you're getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. We have discovered it's very hard to burn out. It's almost impossible to burn out with those things.
What you said about burnout there really struck me. Burnout is super common, yes, in the executive population, but I think it's common in all grades and whatever your job status is. I think we're seeing it. I'm certainly coming across it more and more in my work, and when I sort of talk for companies, I'm seeing it everywhere. And so what you said there was, if I've got it right, it was regular active recovery, regular access to flow state, and 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night makes it almost impossible to burn out. So let's just break that down. When you say active recovery as opposed to passive recovery, you did give some examples, but can you just explain what the difference is? Because I think at the moment, what I see in my patient population is many people will come back, or they finished a long day on Zooms at work if they're working from home, and relaxation is the glass of wine and the television. Why is a more active form of recovery better? What does it do to our biology?
Okay, so I am not a fan of booze or TV, right? I'm not saying booze or TV are bad and you shouldn't do them. But what I will say is, if you're interested in significant peak performance, ongoing, so when you finish the day and you want to relax, problem with booze is once you have really more than like one glass of whatever, it starts messing with your sleep cycles. So you cannot get 7-8 hours of sleep a night. You're going to start running at a detriment, pretty much instantly. It's hard to make that up, which is the problem with one of the big problems with booze. There are a couple others, but that's one of the bigger ones. And then if you're drinking, more than 2 or 3, you're hungover, right? And now forget peak performance, like you're hungover, right? Like, so that's the problem with booze, which is not like, I like to tell people, like, from shake the snow globe and go on vacation every now and again from your brain. I'm fine with booze and drugs. I really am. Like, I've got no judgment. I find they're very effective tools sometimes when you can't take a vacation, you can't whatever, but you just want to shut it off. But there's a huge physical penalty on the other side of that. And you better spend sleeping the entire next day, than trying to go to work, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so enough of that. TV, here's the problem. So for real recovery, you have to spend a bunch of time, you have to change your brain waves. So brain waves normally are, when we're awake and we're alert and paying attention to the world, they're in beta. It's a fast moving wave, right? Right now, you and I are having a conversation with both in beta, right? If I crank beta up, give you a high beta wave, that's anxiety, right? Underneath beta is alpha. Alpha is daydreaming mode. It's where you're sort of going from thought to thought without a lot of kind of resistance. Underneath that is theta. Theta is REM sleep. It's where you're going from thing to thing with no internal resistance, right? In REM sleep, in alpha, you may think of a green sweater and it might remind you of a green turtle, right? Like that you might produce. But in theta, the green sweater becomes the green turtle, becomes the green planet, becomes the green universe, becomes the Incredible Hulk, who's, right? It's just one after leads to the next kind of thing. Flow, by the way, takes place on the borderline between alpha and theta. Television, you need, what are all the techniques that you and I were talking about? Restorative yoga, a long walk in nature, Epsom salt baths, what all those do. As a general rule, they help flush cortisol and some of the stress hormones out of our system, and they help kick the brain towards alpha. Alpha seems to be, some time in alpha seems to be what we need to recover. Here's the problem with TV. TV makes us feel passively like we're in alpha. It makes you feel like you're relaxing. TV, even if you're dealing with like Acorn TV, slow British dramas, right? Even then, anytime there's a quick cut between things, you have what's known as a Salience Network, right? This is a novelty detector, and it's scouring the world at all times for anything new and novel. And it's doing this because, one, anything new and novel could be a danger, could be a threat, might want to run away from it, or could be an opportunity, could be something to eat, could be something to mate with, right? So we have a Salience Network, it's hyper-tuned, and as soon as there's a quick cut, that's a novel perspective change. Oh my God, novelty. So even though you feel like you're chilling out, your brain is going from alpha jumping up to beta every time. And if there's any violence in what you're watching or anything else like that, it's going to high beta. And even though it feels like you're relaxing, you're not. So your brain is not recovering. And if you couple the not recovery of television to booze, and you do this consistently as your way of unwinding night after night after night, you're not recovering at all. Regular access to your primary flow activity is sort of part of that as well. And I mean, more than anything else, to put it colloquially, flow is when we feel most alive. And right, it's really hard to get through hard days, hard times without that feeling. Now, if people are working from home and for Zoom, there's other things we can layer into this that are sort of, how do you survive in a crisis? We can add on to that, whatever. But for burnout, Regular access to what we call your primary flow activity. Primary flow activity is that thing that you've done all your life. It could be skiing, surfing, snowboarding, rock climbing, dancing to hip hop, dancing salsa, playing chess, walking your dog, whatever it is. Everybody's got a primary flow activity. And you want to double down on that in times of stress for sure. But you definitely want regular access to that. And this is key. So we're talking about two things that busy executives, or busy, let's not even say executives, busy 21st century citizens don't like to do, right? They don't like to play because we're adults now and we're going to put down childish things. And I'm not going surfing and I'm not going skiing and I don't get to go out and dance to hip hop anymore because I've got an adult and I have responsibility, right? And I've got kids and I've got family and I've got, I got to put away childish things, and it's just a disaster. And it's a recipe for burnout.
Primary flow activity, you gave some great examples. Could this be for someone a 30-minute walk in nature?
Oh, yeah. By the way, the most common flow states on earth are reading. You always know reading flow is, so it doesn't happen. It usually happens when you're reading something that's a little bit intellectually challenging and makes you think. So when your brain starts pinballing from idea to idea to idea, like you're totally engrossed, and then suddenly you have that insight and it leads, right? That's reading flow. Very common. So yeah, this could be whatever works for you. And it could vary from week to week or season to season or month. You know what I mean? Some months it could be you're learning to cook and being in the kitchen is the most flowy thing you could possibly do. And some months it's playing with your kids. And so, there's lots of activities here that work, but you have to double down on it. And the reason is this: three things are really key. One, especially if you're fighting burnout or if you're just fighting crisis like COVID, 21st century life right now. One, as we move into flow, stress hormones are flushed out of our system. There's a global release of nitric oxide. It's a gaseous stickling molecule. It's everywhere in the body. It pushes stress hormones out of our system. So you're automatically resetting the nervous system. This is another reason that primary flow activities are so important: A, to combating crises, and B, to pausing burnout, because they flush the stress hormones from your system. They reset the nervous system. Secondly, the same neurochemicals that show up in flow, besides performance enhancement, pleasure, they boost the immune system. So you're getting an immune system boost. You're resetting the nervous system. You're getting an immune system boost, which is important for staving off burnout or coping with crisis as well. Here's the coolest part: the increase in motivation, definitely increase in creativity. We know this from work that was done at Harvard. These are massive increases, by the way. Depending on whose numbers you're going for, flow will amplify creative problem solving 400 to 700%. It's a huge amplification in creative problem solving. And that heightened creativity, and this is Teresa Amable's work at Harvard, outlasts the flow state by a day, maybe two. So one of the reasons this matters in crisis situations or burnout situations, you want that creativity because it's how you get out of the bad situation you're in. You need it, right? So you've got one state, primary flow activity, that's going to reset your nervous system, boost your immune system, heighten creativity, and heighten motivation, and generally increase overall well-being and life satisfaction. That is, so when we work at the Flow Research Collective, we work with everybody. We train about 1,000 people a month, but on average, they're peak performers. Now these could be, insurance brokers from Delhi, or, stockbrokers from Munich, or soccer moms from Indiana. Like, it doesn't matter, but they're just interested in peak performance, or it's US Navy SEALs or CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And here's what's interesting. When I teach active recovery, for example, or primary flow activity, these are grit skills to peak performers. They require grit. That's why in Art Impossible, I have active recovery as a grit skill. Peak performers don't like to shut it down. You don't want to stop. You want to always go, go, go. But the lesson here, there's two really big lessons in peak performance. The first is your emotions don't mean what you think they mean. The second is a lot of times you got to go slow to go fast. This is one of those times you have to go slow to go fast. Burnout is so costly. Any kind of stress and anxiety is costly, but burnout is so exceptionally costly to performance and will set you back so far that you have to stay ahead of that curve. So you got to go slow to go fast.
Yeah. Primary flow activities, how often do you recommend people access them? Because obviously it depends. If it's skiing and you don't live near a mountain, well, you're going to struggle. Whereas a 30-minute walk in nature, if you can get into flow doing that. And I wonder where that comes into flow, because if we have to hit that challenge sweet spot where it's hard enough,
I can tell you how to do it. I can break that down for you. But yeah, I mean, get into flow any way you possibly can, more important than your primary flow activity. What we have found, and I think it's, first of all, you got to start by starting, right? Like if you've got 10 minutes a week, then you've got 10 minutes a week. That's what you're doing. If you've got 20, great. What the research seems to show, and I think we need way more research on this particular thing, but the way research seems to show that about an afternoon a week is sort of the minimal requirement. Now you could split that, and by afternoon, I mean like 3 to 4 hours, right? Now you could split that up, half an hour, right? 20 minutes, 2 hours, however you want to do it. That seems to be what works best. But I think there's going to be a lot of individual variation. I think it's going to change over time. I think it's going to change with age. It may be different men to women. So run the experiment for yourself, but 3 to 4 hours is sort of what we see. So for a primary flow activity, how do you walk yourself into flow? I do this all the time. I do this every day, in fact, so I start my day with a 4-hour writing session. I write every morning from 4 a.m. to about 8 a.m. And then I take my dogs for a hike in the backcountry. I live in the mountains, and I just walk out the door and go up the mountain. And sometimes this is just an active recovery process. I'm just going for a walk. Or sometimes, especially if the writing was a real struggle, right, and it didn't put me into flow, right? Usually writing will drop me into flow. But if it didn't, and I'm really frustrated, then I will do a flow walk. So what's a flow walk? We have something called exercise-induced transient hypofrontality, the temporary deactivation of the prefrontal cortex of the part of your brain that's right back here. This is why all those strange things happen in flow. For example, why does time pass so strangely in flow? When you go out and for a walk in nature and you walk, depending on your fitness level, about 20 to 40 minutes, it gets quiet upstairs, right? That shuts off. Now that's not flow, but it's the edge of flow. And you've now produced one of the major conditions that has to happen in flow. If you now want to, so this can just go out for a walk, 20 to 40 minutes. Now, and you may want to time this ahead of time, meaning because there's a location thing that's going to matter here. So you're not probably going to get this right the first time out. But at the point that you tend to, for me, it's about, I would say 30 minutes of hiking uphill, slowly with my dogs in the morning, things quiet down. Once that happens, you want to introduce some dopamine into the system. Usually the easiest way to do this, I do it with risk. I hike up a hill and then I run down the hill. If you don't want to do it with risk, or you want a lesser version, hike into the forest and then just jog through a forest. Just weaving in and out of the trees is going to be enough. It's novelty. It'll be enough new visual stimulation. Novelty also gives you dopamine. So you don't need risk. You can just have novelty. Unpredictability will also give you that dopamine. So take a walk into a part of the city that you've never been to before, where there's lots of novel things to look at. That will do the same sort of thing. And then I like to once you've got a little bit of dopamine in your system, if you really want flow at that point, I try to exhaust myself. I basically, what I'll do is I'll hike for 20 minutes, go uphill really hard for 5 minutes, and then run downhill for 5 minutes. And then you're essentially in a low-grade flow state. So 20-minute walk, I would make things more vigorous for 5 minutes. That's just to get a little bit of endorphins and anandamide, the painkiller, right? And then you want to introduce some dopamine. So walk until it's quiet upstairs, make it hard, But just for a brief, you don't need a lot of hard. You just need like 30 seconds to a couple minutes just to get a little bit of natural painkiller flowing. And then you want some dopamine. And that is either novelty or risk. And anybody can do that pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, I love that. And the benefits I can just see are profound, whether it's you're trying to deal with burnout, just generalized stress, whether you're trying to solve a problem in your work that you can't solve. And, maybe when you're out there, you're going to fire up the default mode network. So actually, there's all kinds of things.
Well, also, have you written about the impact of nature on our neurobiology also, right?
Yeah.
If you walk in nature, right, you're also getting, additional benefits. And if you walk in nature someplace where you can find really wide vistas to look at, that's even additional benefits. And I could talk about the neurobiology under why wide vistas and whatever, if you care, but like walking in nature where you can see far and wide, it's really freaking good for you. And it's going to outperform pretty much any antidepressant in the market. And then if you add in a flow hike to boot, you're doing some good stuff for yourself.
Does it matter if you are listening to music and or podcasts when you walk? And the reason I ask this is because clearly it's very, very popular these days. I do it myself sometimes, but I've also noticed sometimes if I'm really busy in my head, if there's been I'm trying to process a lot of stuff, let's say for writing and all these different ideas, and I sometimes start walking with a podcast on, I say, no, I don't want all this noise. I just want peace. I want calm. And I'll either move to relaxing music or I'll take my earphones off and just listen to the wind and the birds or whatever. So I think this is
it's
really
a great question.
interesting.
So I think podcasts you want your brain turning off, right? You need it to go from beta, awake and alert, down to the alpha theta borderline to get into flow. You can only do that if you're not really using too much brain power. Or if you're reading, you can get into reading flow. You can concentrate like one thing, but hiking, walking, that's going to be taking your energy. And I think it's a limited thing. Flow is a high energy state.
As it gives you energy or it takes your energy?
Well, both. It gives you a lot of energy, but it takes a lot of energy. So if you want to be in flow on a regular basis, you gotta, you have to hydration, nutrition, 7-8 hours of sleep a night. These things matter because these are high energy states, right? So that's part of it as well.
Yeah. Wow. There's just so much to think about with respect to these things. I wanted to move on to emotional intelligence. There was a really interesting section in the book on emotional intelligence and what's the relationship between emotional intelligence and peak performance. But then also what really struck me in that section was that you wrote about empathy and you said that empathy is an easily trainable skill. Now, I don't think most people think it is. I think many people think you're either born with it, you intuitively can practice empathy with other people or you can't. So that really just made me stop and pause and reflect a little bit. So I wonder if you could explain a little bit around those areas.
Emotional intelligence and empathy. So let's start with emotional intelligence. And I like to be pretty ruthless about this. Now, I'm an introvert. I'm not terribly fond of most people. I like animals better than people as a general rule. So grain of salt with what I'm about to say, but if you're interested in peak performance, two things matter. One, so I like to say that positive psychology has spent 30 years sort of outlining what are the peak performance basics. There are cognitive basics and there are physical basics. On the physical side, we've been talking about you need hydration and nutrition to maintain proper energy levels. You need 7-8 hours of sleep a night. You need a third thing on the physical side that people often don't talk about on the physical side, which is social support. When you do not have a robust social support network, and I don't mean lots of people, I mean you may know only a handful of people, but they love you and you love them and there's a deep relationship there and you regularly check in. Why does this matter? Whenever you encounter a challenge, right, your brain says, oh, here's a problem. Is this a challenge or is it a threat? Now, this is all day, every day for all of us, right? You're always encountering stuff and you're like, challenge your threat, challenge your threat. And when your brain makes that determination, one of the things it asks is, hey, you got posse? Because if you're solo, man, solving that challenge, it's a threat. And I got to sound the alarm bell. Here's some anxiety. Here's some stress. But if you've got posse, you've got people around who love you, help you, will pick you up if you fall down, or et cetera, et cetera. Now, oh, wait, maybe it's just a challenge. And you can rise to the occasion. So on a fundamental level, social support, emotional intelligence matters, because you have to maintain robust social networks just to sort of be able to perform at your best. More importantly, at a really kind of mercenary statement, between you and your dreams, other people lie. Like, it's just, there's no way around it. There are other people standing between you and your dreams. Maybe these people are going to be in your way, and you're going to have to find ways to move around them. There are obstacles, and maybe they're there to help you out, and you can find ways. And if you can get along with them, you can really get farther faster. But either way, if you want to navigate that situation quickly and you really want to get where you're going, emotional intelligence matters. And to put it another way, peak performance is hard. Life in general is difficult. And if you're going after high, hard goals, right, which is what peak performance is really about, well, it's going to be even harder. Why would you not train emotional intelligence? It just doesn't make any sense, right? It gives you better energy levels at a foundational level. We know, by the way, that, Chris Peterson has, the positive psychologist who's at the University of Michigan, has said that you can summarize 30 years of positive psychology in a single phrase, which is other people matter, right? Like, that's what he's talking about. We need other people. We're social creatures. We need other people, and they're going to be between you and wherever you're going anyways. What I say when it comes to emotional intelligence is, first of all, it's readily trainable, right? Like, I tell people to take an 80-20 approach to it, right? We tend to get 80% of our results from 20% of our effort. So what really matters the most when it comes to emotional intelligence? Where are the things where do you get the most mileage? Active listening, right? That means that when I'm in a conversation with you, I'm not thinking about the cool, witty thing I'm going to say next, or that sarcastic thing you might have just maybe said. So I'm just paying attention to you. I'm listening to you. I'm not judging you. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next. I'm paying attention to you and listening to you. And when it's my turn to speak, then I speak.
Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying this conversation, there's loads more like it on my channel. Please do press subscribe and hit that bell. Now, back to the conversation. A micro stress dose is a little dose of stress that in isolation you can easily handle. But when they mount up one on top of the other, they start to add up and they can start to become problematic. So we have all got what I call our own personal stress threshold. And it will probably vary throughout various different days of the week, depending on what we've got going on, depending on how well we've slept, how many balls we're juggling. But we have this stress threshold. So let's say you wake up in the morning and you're feeling calm. You can start accumulating micro stress doses bit by bit. And the more of them you accumulate, the closer you get to your own stress threshold. When you get to your stress threshold, that is when things start to go wrong. That is when you have an unreasonable reaction to an email that you've received. That is when you have an argument with your partner. That is when you scream at your kids when they haven't actually done anything, because you have passed your threshold. And I make the case that many of us have had 10 to 15 hits of micro stress before we've walked out of the door in the morning. So what is the what is a common scenario these days? Okay, work's stressful. Come back, I'm knackered, I want to unwind. I don't want to go to bed because then it all starts tomorrow. So I'm going to stay up late on Netflix, unwinding and numbing what is going on in my life. So I go to bed late. Right. I set my alarm for 6:30 in the morning because I've got work the next day. Okay, so you're in a deep sleep, and at 6:30, your alarm goes off. Boom. Micro stress dose number 1, because waking you, jolting you from a deep sleep is a stressor on the body. You look at the time, which will be on your phone, you look at it, you know what, I've got a few more minutes. You press snooze. At 6:36, boom, alarm hits again, micro stress dose number 2. Then you think, you know what, I better get up now. So you grab your phone whilst you're sort of stretching in bed. Let me just look at my email. Oh man, there was 3 work emails yesterday. I didn't get round to doing them. I've got to do that today. MSD, microstress dose number 3. Then you quickly go onto social media. You know what? Someone's been mean to me on my last post. MSD number 4. Then you realize, oh my God, I've been in bed for 20 minutes. I'm running late now. I really need to get a move on. And I'm not going to keep sort of laboring the points, but you can very easily see how before you even leave the house in the morning, you've picked up 15 MSDs. And what does that mean? That means you are closer to your threshold, which means it's going to take less little hits of micro stress in the day to tip you over. This is why I'm so passionate about having some downtime, having some space in the morning to insulate yourself, make you more resilient. It's not just about reducing the stress in our life where we can. I get some people live difficult lives. Some people don't earn much money. They're working 2 jobs. That is fundamentally stressful. But if you can adopt some of these techniques, and pretty much every single tip in the book is free, and I'm super passionate about that they are accessible to everyone. You know what? You can apply these tools to make yourself more resilient to the stress. So let's say you've got a stressful life. If you're going out of the house with only 2 microstress doses as opposed to 15, you've got a much bigger buffer before you start to have problems. And so I think that's a useful analogy. I will say though, even if you have had a macro stress dose, one of these big hits of stress, like trauma of some sort, like physical abuse, and I say this with the utmost respect, of course, that needs processing. That needs probably to see a professional and actually untangle that. But if you talk to psychologists, if you talk to therapists, they will tell you that it is even more important in those situations that you apply these principles, because they will help keep you at a level that hopefully you can manage things a bit better than without. So it really, I really do believe that this is a book for everyone, whether you have macro stress doses, micro stress doses, whether you have too much stress in your life, or whether you have not enough passion, because these are universal themes. And I do think I have simplified it right down where people will think, you know what? Yeah, you know what? Maybe I can do that. I think I can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I think you're absolutely right. And what I like about the book is that it's very practical and solution. I mean, it's called the stress solution. I mean, it's about the solutions, right? And some of these are very easy to implement in your life, like go for a walk, turn your phone off, go to bed early, like, you know, very, very like simple implementable tools, morning routine, whatever that may look like for you, meditation, mindfulness practices. Some of them are a little bit more ephemeral. I mean, your first bucket here is purpose. And, you know, that's a harder thing to kind of figure out for yourself. Everybody has their own relationship to purpose. And, you know, I feel like there's a lot of people who live their lives relatively untethered and don't have a sense of purpose, or what, you know, we both know the Okinawans call ikigai, which you talk about in the book. And that's a journey, right? So how do you help? I mean, I think that's fundamental, right? If you don't have purpose, then everything else is sort of a house of cards. Well, but that's the hardest one.
That's the hardest one. That's why I started the book with it, because it's the hardest. And I think it's the most important, because fundamentally a life lacking meaning and purpose is inherently a stressful life. Right? It just is. We all know that. The research backs it up. Not having a sense of meaning and purpose in your life is associated with much worse health outcomes. Of course, do we need science to tell us that? No, probably not.
And feeling bad about the fact that you don't know what your purpose is an added stress on top
Absolutely.
of that.
So let me clarify my view on this. So I thought, okay, this is all about practical solutions. Mm-hmm. I, like you, love that Japanese concept of ikigai. Right, I do. I came across it, I think, on a Facebook post a few years ago, and I was, you know, one of my...
It's a Dan Buettner thing from Blue Zones.
I didn't come across it with Dan, actually.
He helped kind of usher it in, because Okinawa is one of the Blue Zones, and their relationship with purpose, which they call ikigai, is fundamental to their longevity and happiness.
For sure. And so one of my Facebook friends, so if you're watching the video, that was inverted commas friends, and to be fair, I'm being slightly... you know, I'm sort of trying to make a point, which is probably not the best way of doing it. But I saw this post, and she put this thing up about ikigai, and I saw these 4 circles, and the middle area was shaded where these 4 things intersect. You know, ikigai is when you find something in your life to do, something that you love, something that you're good at, something that the world needs, and something that pays you money. And I read it, and I think I read this pretty soon after my dad died, which is a very significant moment, clearly, for me. And I remember reading that, and I thought, yeah, I like that. You know, I fancy a bit of ikigai in my life. You know, I want that. And I started to reflect on it and think about it. And then I thought, well, this could be useful for some of my patients. So I started to talk about this idea with my patients, and I found many of them found it quite stressful to think about. How can I find one thing in my life that gives me this sense of ikigai? That's just too stressful. You know, I'm working to pay the bills and to meet the mortgage payments and to put food on my plate.
You feel ashamed that you can't master that.
And what was super interesting for me is in January, when the book came out in the UK and I was on my tour, I was in London and I spoke about this. And at the end, there was a Q&A, and this Japanese student in London put her hand up. You know, so she asks a question. She says, Dr. Chatterjee, I just want to add to this that I have grown up in Japan and I have heard about this concept of ikigai, and I found it super stressful my whole life as I have to live up to this esteemed idea that is embedded in my culture, and I find it stressful and I can't do it. So that was super interesting. I heard that from my patients. I also heard it from a Japanese student in London. So I sort of pay homage to this in the book, but then I come up with what I call the LIVE framework. I've created a framework that I think, and I've seen very, very practical for people of how they start to find meaning and purpose in their life. Because I get it. You're listening to this podcast on a train and you're thinking, yeah, meaning and purpose, it's all very well for you two to talk about that. You know what? Your life is different from mine. So it's a very simple framework. L is for love. I is for intention, V is for vision, E is for engagement. Now, we don't necessarily need to unpack the whole thing, but the point about it is you don't need to get all of these from one aspect in your life. You can get them from different aspects in your life, but it's a simple way to start moving you towards finding your meaning and purpose. So what is the first L? The first L is love. It's about passion. Right, so research shows us that regularly doing things that you love helps to make you more resilient to stress. And I'm saying that resilience is super important. But at the same time, being stressed out day in, day out makes it harder to experience pleasure in day-to-day things. So one of the prescriptions I give people, and I don't particularly like the term prescription, but one of the recommendations I make is to have a daily dose of pleasure, even if just for 5 minutes. Now, again, just to bring this to life, I had a patient, 52-year-old chap, or maybe 53, early 50s chap, CFO of a local plastics company, right? Again, comes in to see me. He's worried, doctor, do I have depression? What's going on? I struggle to motivate myself sometimes. I can't concentrate at work. I feel quite indifferent about my relationships. What is going on? So, as always, I try and unpack different aspects of their lives. So, do you like your job? Yeah, not really, it's so-so, I have to do it, I've got a family I need to provide for them. I said, okay, fine, how's your relationship with your wife? You know what, so-so, I don't really see her that much, it's fine. Do you have any hobbies? Dog, I don't have time for hobbies, I'm busy, I kept back late. I said, okay, what about weekends? Weekends, I've got to do the household chores, I've got to take the kids to their classes, I don't have time for hobbies. So, the prescription I gave him, the recommendation I made to him at the end of doing this, and again, so that I don't get, not that it matters if I get criticized, but just so people understand, I did do the safety netting that is required of me. I didn't feel he was an active suicide risk. I didn't do all these sort of various things that I have to do as a doctor. I did check. But ultimately, what I felt was that he didn't have any passion in his life, right? And I said, look, I know you don't do any hobbies now. Did you ever have a hobby? Well, yeah, I guess, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I loved playing with train sets. I said, okay, great. Do you have a train set at home? I've got one at home. It's in my attic. I've not seen it for years. I said, okay, look, what I would love you to do when you go home tonight is to get your train set out. Now, you've got a smirk on your face, right?
Yeah.
I get it.
Hey, I have no judgment on people's hobbies. I had a train set when I was a kid.
Well, I thought you were smirking at the fact that he came in to see me with a problem he was concerned about, and my prescription was to get out his train sets.
I'm with you on that.
You're with me on that.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
So he agrees to go and do this. So he goes away. I don't see him then. It is not uncommon in general practice in the UK for you not to be able to follow up every single patient. You just simply cannot do that. So I got on with my job. I was, doing my thing. 3 months later, I'd finished my morning clinic, and then we have something called home visits in the UK where, normally after your morning clinic, you will then have a list from reception of people who are maybe elderly, infirm, who can't get out to the practice, and you go and visit them at home to look after them. So I went to the car park to go and do my home visits, and I bumped into his wife. And I said, hey, look, how's your husband getting on? He said, Dr. Chatterjee, I feel like I've got the guy I married back again. He comes home from work, he's straight onto his train set, he's on eBay all the time trying to buy collector's items, and he's subscribed to this monthly collector's magazine now, right? So she's happy.
He's wearing his conductor hat in the house.
Hey, but she's happy, but I still hadn't seen him, right?
Uh-huh.
Again, roughly 3 months later, I'm just going through my clinic as usual, and I see his name pop up, and he has had some blood tests, had a well-manned check, and he's coming in to see me to go through them. Welcoming in, and before we go into the blood results, I say, hey, look, how are you getting on? He says, Doc, I feel like a different person. Life is great. I said, my mood's better. I've got energy. I said, okay, cool. How's your job? I love it. I'm really getting a lot out of my job now. How's your relationship with your wife? Really, really good. I feel really close to her. So, just like that case, I don't know how long we've been chatting for, maybe an hour ago, just like that story about the kid who was feeling low and who had a friendship deficiency, did this guy have a mental health problem? Sure, I think he had symptoms that would be consistent. I could have labeled him and given him a diagnosis, right? And of course, sometimes that may be appropriate, although I have issues with labels because I think what that does to people, that's a separate story. Or did this chap really have a deficiency of passion in his life? And the remarkable thing for me is when that passion deficiency gets corrected, not only does he feel better in himself, but everything else in his life starts to come back online. The job that he couldn't stand before, now he enjoys. The relationship that was a bit tired and he felt a bit indifferent about, now he's feeling closer to his wife. And, this is why I'm trying to make the case that this live framework is applicable. It is achievable. If you are listening to this and you want more meaning and purpose and you don't know where to start, I challenge you. When was the last time you did something you love, right? If you haven't done it recently, schedule it in your diary. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be swim run like we did at the start, right? For many of my patients, I say, give yourself 5 minutes a day for a daily dose of pleasure. That could be going for a walk. That could be reading a book, listening to a podcast. It could even be coming home from work, going onto YouTube, finding your favorite comedian and laughing for 5 minutes. So when we say meaning and purpose is unattainable for many people, I disagree, because if you start with small steps, you could call them hacks. I know you're not a huge fan of the hacking world, and I wouldn't call them hacking in the same sense. I'd call them, you want to get to a certain destination. The destination seems too far away. So let's look at a signpost that's nearby. Let's just break this down, make it super simple. Do something for 5 minutes a day that you enjoy. Do that consistently, week after week, and you will start to find other things in your life that will bring you closer to meaning and purpose. That's just the L, right? But I'm super passionate that we can all find meaning and purpose. Of course, it's harder. This guy didn't find his ikigai, right? This chap I just spoke about, he's not quit his job and is now living on a beach and living his kind of this romantic idea of what a beautiful life looks like. No, he's just found passion in his life, and suddenly his day-to-day life that was monotonous before suddenly is vibrant. And I'm so passionate about this, Rich, because it's not as hard as we think it is. Take small steps.
Small steps are everything. I think what happens is people, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but people see, read, hear this message of follow your passion, and it does have that shame-provoking, unintended consequence to it. And it just seems overwhelming and intimidating, because that gets associated with quitting your job or, being a digital nomad or like making these massive, seismic shifts in your life. But that may be the ultimate trajectory if you keep pulling on that thread. Like maybe that train guy is going to reinvent himself and become some kind of, like toy train entrepreneur, who knows? But more likely than not, it is just having the wherewithal to set aside a little bit of time to take a tiny step to like embrace some aspect of what you love. I mean, that's how it started with me. Like I went back to the swimming pool and jumped in the water. It was nothing more than that. And it's led to me sitting here with you in a manner I could have never predicted in a million years. But the tiny first step that seems meaningless and unconnected to ephemeral concepts like ikigai and passion is where all of these things are seated.
Yeah, for sure. And, this is such a fundamentally important point, not only under the umbrella term of stress, just for just our overall well-being, how we feel about ourselves. It's very hard to do that without passion. It's very hard to do that unless there is some overarching objective or direction in your life where you are going. And I get it. Many people don't feel that they can have it. This is why I drill down, I think so hard, how do you make this achievable? How do you bring these kind of really lofty concepts and ideals, and how do you bring them right down to something that someone who's working in a council flat, who's working 2 jobs, who feels that there is no way out, to something that they can apply? And, I know this stuff works because I've been using these tips with real people with busy lives, and you pointed it out. That's it. It's not about necessarily that first step. Of course, that's very important, but who knows what that guy will be doing in 5 years? He's now on the road to that destination. Well, there is no destination, but he's on that road, on that journey towards meaning and purpose, and it starts with those small steps.
Mm-hmm. So we are headed into holiday season, the most stressful time of the year. By the time this podcast comes out, we'll be more in the thick of it. This is the moment where stress peaks. People are with their relatives. They're in high stress situations. There's a lot of pressure to show up for other people, and it pushes people over the edge. So I think it would be really helpful and instructive to kind of provide some guidance for how people can better navigate the minefields of the holiday season.
Yeah, sure. You're right. It is all over the world, I think. Well, certainly in the countries in which we live, it's a time fraught with problems, pressures, external pressures, things that we feel that we have to do. There are so many things that we can do, but the thing that is rising to the surface in me now is think about downtime, right? We need downtime. We thrive on downtime. Our brains thrive on downtime. You simply cannot get up, go on your phone, consume, watch what the world is giving you, reacting, go to after work drinks, go to all these family engagements, come back, lie in bed, consume more. You simply just cannot do that without there being a consequence. You will be accumulating micro stress dose after micro stress dose, and you will go over, and it will lead to family arguments. It will lead to a row with your partner. It will lead to you getting stressed out at work and falling out with your boss. It is all a consequence of that framework of micro stress doses and where is your stress threshold. You need to minimize the micro stress doses, and you need to take active steps to increase your resilience. So, well, let's call it simple. You mentioned a morning routine, right? I'm a huge fan of morning routines. And the framework I create for people is a morning routine has 3 M's, and the way I see it: mindfulness, movement, and mindset. So if you want a morning routine, you don't know where to start, think about those 3 M's. Now, you can personalize them to your own life. If you have got an hour in the morning, great. If you've got 5 minutes, you can still do it in 5 minutes. Mindfulness, that could be meditation. It could be breathing. Whatever you want can be mindfulness, whatever appeals to you. Movement, anything you want. Do some push-ups, do some yoga stretches. And then mindset. Mindset is do something to put you in a positive frame of mind. That can be reading a book that you enjoy that makes you feel good. It could be doing some affirmations like I often do with my daughter. Now, to really be clear on this, I have a patient in particular who says, Doc, these morning routines, they sound great. I'm too busy. I've got to get the kids ready. I don't have time for this. I have persuaded her to try it, and she now sticks religiously to her 5-minute morning routine, right? So my own routine tends to be about half an hour. I have that luxury now. I didn't always, but hers is 5 minutes. So what does she do? Let's break those 3 M's down. First 10, mindfulness. She does deep breathing for 1 minute when she gets up, right? She does a breath that I've taught her that I really like called the 3-4-5 breath. When she breathes in for 3, she holds for 4, and she breathes out for 5. Now, that is 1 breath. In the book, there is a whole breathing menu with 6 different breaths. If you don't like that one, don't do it. Choose one that you do like. So that's her 1 minute of breathing. Then what does she do? For her next 2 minutes, she does some sun salutations that she learned in a yoga class. Just 2 minutes. Then what she does, she reads a book that she likes. She keeps 5 books there, and she picks one. She reads a few pages. Just the act of having 5 minutes to herself in that morning actually transforms the rest of her day. This particular patient had really bad eczema. Her eczema has gone down dramatically since she started doing this morning routine. When you understand the physiology, of course that makes sense. Stress ultimately impacts the immune system. Eczema actually, at its core, is a slight dysfunction of certain parts of the immune system. Therefore, if you can impact the immune system, you stand a chance that you actually might be able to reduce your eczema. Not in every case, but in this case. So have some time to yourself. Really be mindful of that. And if you find a morning routine helpful, start there. Now, the next thing I'd probably say to people is think about how much you've moved, right? Yes, we know physical activity is important, but fundamentally, if we go back to 2 million years ago, when we think about our stress response, what is the stress response designed to do? It is priming us for physical activity. Nowadays, the stresses are coming in such a way like, we're sitting on our butts at our desk and our email inbox is stressing us out. Or the fact that actually, oh man, I am exhausted today, but everyone at work's going out tonight, and then my sister's flying into town tonight. Oh man, I just want to go to sleep, right? So I would say, have you moved enough? Just ask yourself, have you moved? If you haven't, just make it a priority every day to do something. Even if it's a 10-minute walk at lunchtime, put your phone down, go outside for 10 minutes, and you will start to burn off that stress in your body. But those are 2 simple things, right? When you're traveling, if you're traveling to go and see your family, right? And this applies not in the holiday season as well, that people are traveling to work and they're getting stressed out. Use that travel time to really look after your mental health, right? Don't put the news on. Don't listen to what Trump has just tweeted, right? Own your mental space. Own what's going on in there. Use that time to listen to relaxing music. Listen to an inspiring podcast. Pull up the Calm meditation app on your phone and put your headphones in and meditate for 10 minutes. I am not asking you to do 3 hours of yoga every day, even though that will help you, right? I'm asking you to just think about, have I given myself a bit of time today? If you are getting stressed out at a party, your family are there, your mother is stressing you out, right? Your mother-in-law, let's say, or whatever, check in with your breath. It's a cliche. It is the biggest cliche, just breathe. If people understood what breathing actually does, on a fundamental physiological level, we would all be practicing it every day. Breathing is information for your body. When you're feeling stressed, when you've got deadlines that you're working away for, you will not realize, but your breathing will change. You will start to breathe more from your chest than your diaphragm. You'll breathe quicker. Your breaths will be more shallow. And what does that do? That sends messages to your brain that I am in danger, that there is a problem. And that gets you in a vicious loop where you start to breathe faster. Now, the great news about that is that you can very easily change that situation. If you consciously change your breathing, you can change your physiology. So if that's happening, you're at a party, whatever, there's a work do, you know what, maybe go to the restroom or go outside and just for 2 minutes, breathe. Do the 3-4-5 breath. If you don't like that one, do a box breath where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. I guarantee if you do that for 1 minute or 2 minutes, you will feel calmer, and the way you deal with that situation will absolutely, it will change. Mm-hmm. You will be less reactive. Alcohol, right? I get it. It's a time of year where people like to drink. Fine. I recognize that. That is something people associate with that time of year. Just be mindful of the fact that alcohol will trash your sleep, right? There's no other way of saying it. Alcohol trashes our sleep quality. If you've been out for a few nights on the bounce and you're tired, you know what? Learn to say no. Just look at your diary and go, you know what? Do I need to go to every single social engagement? Or can I go, I've gone to 2 this week. Maybe I'll just stay in one night. And, I'll reset my stress threshold by having an early night and going to bed. And then maybe I'll go out tomorrow night. If you're out drinking, maybe can you just reduce it a little bit? If you like to have a glass of wine when you're out, fine. Most people who drink, when you talk to them sober, will tell you, and I appreciate that everyone's different on this, but for most people, the enjoyment comes from that first drink. I shouldn't say for most, for many people, right? There's kind of diminishing returns after that. So, I mean, you may have a different perspective on this. I'm sort of...
I have a whole other thing on that, but go ahead.
Okay, no. I'm going to say some people, right? They will find that actually their enjoyment comes from that first drink, that just little feeling of unwind from the day. Maybe have that first drink, enjoy yourself, stay out, and then, I don't know, don't go overboard, because what happens in holiday season, and I've never really thought about this, never really been asked this, but what happens in holiday season is fundamentally your micro stress doses add up. There are more micro stress doses in your life, so you are operating near to your stress threshold much more than you ordinarily would. So anything that pulls you away from that is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the holiday season is an exacerbated scenario in which we become very reactive to our environment and less mindful about the choices that we're making, because there's a lot of expectations set by other people. And we ping pong around like, I have to go to this event, and then there's that thing, and then my relatives are coming in, and I got to make sure that I get a gift to this person. And it is that can be a fight or flight situation. But I think fundamentally, the more we can cultivate a healthy respect for how to say no when appropriate, and how to create healthy boundaries around self-care. These are the preservation strategies for navigating these things. Just because you're invited to all these places doesn't mean you have to say yes to all of them. And I feel like sometimes, and I know this for myself, I feel like, no, I can't. You don't understand. Like, I have to go to this thing, because if I don't, then this will happen, and that person will say that. Or you don't know my family, and all of that. Like, I get all of that. But to have the wherewithal or the compunction to say, okay, maybe I do have to go to that, but let me take 2 minutes to just be with myself and breathe, so that I can create kind of a protective, invisible boundary around myself that allows me to be more present, more mindful, and less reactive, so that when I am with that family member that easily provokes me, when they push that button like I know that they're going to, I don't do what I always do, which is react and then create this downward spiral of, emotional turpitude.
That's what detachment does, doesn't it? That's what a daily practice of just simply taking a bit of time for yourself, whether it's meditation or breathing or just sitting out staring at the garden where you live, right? What these things start to do for you, they help you get that bit detached. So when someone does potentially inflame you, you're not immediately
extra moment.
You've got an extra moment to go, hey, you know what? I get it. She's traveled a long way. She didn't sleep well last night. Okay, I get it. Let's just let that be. So I think that's important. The other thing, thinking about the holiday season, I've got to say, it's hard to think about it, because I've been walking on the beach this morning. I don't know what the temperature is. It's sunny outside.
It's like 75 degrees out right now.
Yeah, it's so gorgeous. It feels like hard to be talking about this. But, thinking about it, I think over the last 2 years, what we have done with my wife's family around Christmas time, the holiday season in the UK, is... this is not the holiday season. This is particularly around Christmas. Is for us, and for many people, this whole idea of gift buying is incredibly stressful. I must get everyone a gift. I need to, there's so many facets to this, but we have had a very open conversation with her family about not buying gifts. right? Now, I get for some people it is a fundamental part of Christmas. I am not trying to suggest that that need not be the case. It was a fundamental part of Christmas for us. But we have really thought about what Christmas means to us. And really, for us, it's about a time where we can actually switch off and actually spend time with people who maybe we don't prioritize enough at other parts of the year. So we have asked everyone, is like, look, would you be open to not doing the whole gift thing, right? There's an environmental component to this, which is a big thing for many of us these days. This whole idea that we're buying all these frankly unnecessary gifts that most people don't like what we buy for them anyway, and they go in the charity shop or they just sit in a cupboard and they just accumulate. We buy wrapping paper and we wrap it all. Again, I am not trying to take away the magic of Christmas for someone who's listening to this and they love that. I'm just articulating what we have done. We still do that for our kids, although a lot less than we used to. But with my wife's family, we don't buy gifts for anyone anymore. And we used to. And you know what? That has reduced the stress level so much. Like those days running up to Christmas, I'm not frantically trying to rush around thinking, oh, I need to buy a present. That you buy something just so you can give them the present and say Happy Christmas.
I check the box and then it ends up in a landfill.
Yeah. So I think there are many components to sort of, I would ask people, think about the holiday season. What is it really about for you? Not what is it about the way you just, gut reaction, sort of, oh, it is about presents, it's about going out, it's about seeing my friends. Really take a step back and maybe write down, actually, what is it I love about the holiday season? And I think whenever we get our thoughts out of our mind onto paper, it helps to order things, helps to clarify. I mean, on another note, one of the best things about writing a book, I think, is you can have all these wild ideas in your heads, but actually the act of writing a book means you have to order them. You have to find some sort of coherence and clarity to them. And I think you can apply the same thing to the festive season. Write down what you like out of it, what it means to you, and then think about all these engagements, all these things that you've got to do, which ones actually truly match what gives you joy about that part of the season. And I think people might find that, look, I've never tried this to anyone. It's coming up to me now, but I'm thinking that might be a useful framework for people to look at this and go, hey, you know what? I do love seeing my family because I don't see these guys much. But the fact that I go out with work for 3 nights just before that and I get drunk every night and I'm not sleeping means I go into the funnest part of that time already exhausted, already a little bit ratty. Maybe I should just prioritize the thing that I really like about it and not do all this other extra stuff. So I don't know if people find that useful.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's super practical advice. I mean, it's a time fraught with emotional landmines, and I think there's a lot of people, myself included, who go into it thinking this year is going to be different, and then I do the same things that I've always done, and I get the same results. And it's only if you're willing to, make those alterations and invest in your well-being and you're proactive about how you set that schedule and that agenda and what is important and what your priorities are, that you're going to get a different result.
So based on that, what are you going to do differently this year?
I'm actually taking the entire month of December off.
Wow.
So I haven't really taken a break. Like I get to go on a lot of cool trips to cool places, but it's generally related to some work thing or some conference or something like that. I really haven't taken like a vacation, let alone a legitimate break from what I do. Like I've never missed a week of the podcast in 7 years. So I'm going to completely tune out 100% for
no episodes getting released.
Month. No, we're banking everything now. We're getting all the work done. So the show will continue to go on, but I'm going to have nothing to do with it, and I'm going to be off email completely.
Wow.
So I've never done it. It's kind of frightening actually. Like I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also a little scared.
I'm excited
because of
for
that
you.
Emotional attachment. Like, oh, if I, what happens if I step out of this? Do you
think you can step out without checking, without going?
Well, that's what we're going to find out. I'm committed to it though, and I've had like a year to mentally prepare for it, because last year I had good intentions about doing this, but I didn't set in motion everything that needed to be set in motion for it to become a practical reality. And this year, I took steps to make sure that I could do that. So,
I mean, that's incredible.
It's going to be a hectic October and November in order to get everything done so that I can do that. But I'm actually looking forward to it, and I really need it. And I think Rangan, part of it is I love what I do, and I've been doing it for a while. But I started to sense this feeling of like burden around it, and that's not the relationship I want to have to my work. I want to be excited about it and enthusiastic about it. And so there's warning signs like, hey, you really need to reset a little bit and invest in a little bit of rest and self-care so that you can maintain that kind of relationship with the career that you work so hard to create and that you care so much about.
I mean, I guess what you're fundamentally talking about is downtime.
Yeah. I haven't taken any downtime in years and years and years. And I'll take like a day. I mean, most weeks I work 7 days a week. It's not like I'm working all day every day, but I'm like, it's never off. And I don't know if I've ever even gone on like a week vacation. So this is like very, very much longer.
Do you know, for me, as a listener of your show, as well as someone who's been on for the second time now, it's interesting because I'm not necessarily sure that everybody is aware of that, in the sense that, we all, what do we do on social media, right? We post the cool things that we're doing in our life, right? So I may look at your feed and go, hey, oh man, Rich has gone on this cool run in the hills today, or he's now in the ocean, or he's training for swimming. I've not trained. That's a motivation to go and train, right? And may not also recognize that actually, yes, you're doing that and you're sharing that, but at those other times, you are working your butt off, right? And I think that's super fascinating, because although that might seem unrelatable to someone may go, well, I can't take 4 weeks off. Okay, well, use that, break it down into your own life, and figure out what is it that you can do, what is achievable. As you said, you tried to do it last year, you couldn't manage it, but you are doing it this year. And I'm so excited to hear you say that, because frankly, I have no idea how you have put an episode out every week for 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, you do seasons, right? Which is a much more
I do and I don't, right? So what do I do?
Responsible way of doing it.
I don't do it in the conventional way. I basically take August off each year from the podcast, and I say each year. It's only been going for 18 months, so there's been 2 Augusts in that where I've taken off. Now, my decision to do that is because I have a young family. They're off school during that time. My life and my career has really got super, super busy over the last few years. I enjoy it, but I also want to make sure I give time to my kids whilst they're young. So I am not perfect. I have not done it the way I want to ideally do it, but not putting the podcast out because I don't have a team yet who I can... Well, I'm not at the stage yet where that can go out without me. But it sounds as though you couldn't either for 7 years, right?
Well, I mean, it's also been a situation of me addressing certain character defects around like my control freakness and and how I've managed the workload. And now being in a situation where in order to continue to do it and kind of ensure the best evolution of it, there are certain things that I need to step back from and empower other people to do, which makes me nervous as well. So this is like a growth thing for me where I feel very uncomfortable about it, but also believe in its necessity in order to continue doing this. But let me just make clear at the same time, I'm not a practicing doctor while trying to do a podcast like you are. This is like the main thing that I do. I mean, I do other things, but this is the thing that takes up the most amount of my time.
I think, you know what, that's such a... It's really fun for me to hear that on one level because, it's easy. We all fall into the comparison trap, whether we want to or not. We look at people and we go, look at this show's doing this and this show's doing this and stuff. And one of my friends said to me the other day, said, mate, like you do the podcast as well as see patients, as well as write a book a year at the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, that's a good point, actually. It's kind of like, it's not my main thing.
And you're out like talking about the stress solution, but you got another book that's about to come out
in the UK.
So you're cranking out these books. I was going to make a joke about how you have this irrational affinity for the number 4, but because all your books
I've changed it in the next one.
Pillar. Yeah, like you're stepping up to 5 in the next one.
Yeah, look, hey man, look, I am not perfect. I am trying to figure this stuff out at the same time. But one thing that really excites me about hearing your story is, as well as you giving yourself some time off, I bet some magic starts to happen, right? Downtime is so fundamentally important for our brains. And just to make it super clear for people and make it really practical and accessible in their own life, right? We used to think that when we stop focusing on a task in front of us, we used to think that our brains would go to sleep, right? That is not what happens. There is a part of the brain called the default mode network, or the DMN, that goes into overdrive when we stop focusing on a task in front of us. So what does that part of the brain do? Well, it does many, many things. Two of the ones I think are hyper relevant here are the DMN helps you to solve problems and it helps you to be more creative, right? So this is the reason why so many of us come up with our best ideas when we go for a walk, or if you're like me, when you're in the shower, right? Because you have disconnected, you're not focused on something, so your brain does what it wants to do, which is help you and solve problems for you. So I would hypothesize, and I look forward to hearing what happens on this timeout for you. I would imagine you are going to get a ton of creative ideas, stuff that have been bubbling away there that is potentially, I recognize you go for long runs, so I'm sure ideas come up.
Yeah, I mean, the running and the swimming is part of that for me, but I get what you're saying. And that is part of the intention as well. Like I have other books that I want to write, but this takes up so much time that it's very difficult for me to carve out the amount of solitude required to actually write another book.
For sure. But, for someone listening to this who's just heard what I said about the default mode network, I'd really love them to take a minute and think, how can I access that sort of creativity and problem-solving ability in my day-to-day life? And one of my top tips for people, I speak to in a lot of companies now about employee wellness, and I say one of the most transformative things you can do is take a tech-free lunch break, even if it's just for 15 minutes, right? Because what that does is that you fire up the DMN. You will come back more productive. Your stress levels will have come down. You will have more energy. Problems that you couldn't solve in the morning, you will start to solve in the afternoon. And it's such a simple little thing. It's, for want of a better term, it's a hack, right? But there is incredible science around what that actually does. Many of us, if we work in an office, we're sitting there typing away on our computer, on our emails. Oh, it's lunchtime. Okay, pull it out, right? Let's have a look at Instagram. Let's go on my personal email, right? Again, no judgment. I also do that much of the time. But you will start to tap into this innate potential that your brain has when you give it downtime. I made a show for ITV in the UK last year on stress, right? And what did we do as part of that show? We took 3 people and we measured their heart rate variability 24 hours a day for 3 days. Now, that is, we don't need to go down that road, but that is just a measure of your stress levels. Mm-hmm. You want a lot of variability from one beat to the next. That shows you are constantly able to adapt to a changing environment around you. If there is no variation or little variation, it means you've taken on a lot of stress and you are unable to adapt. So it's a bit of a marker of resilience as well. Now, one of these people in particular, he was a manager. I don't know how old he is, about 40 years old, I'm going to guess. Manager, working super hard in his company, wants to lead by example. So gets in early, works right through lunch, stays late working. Now, he obviously applied to come on the show because he was feeling super stressed. He was drinking a bit too much. It was affecting his relationship with his wife. I mean, these are common themes, right? And we measured things. We measured his stress levels. We had an objective measurement. So what was really clear is when he was in the office, he started off the day pretty low stress. They start to go up. At lunchtime, they kept going up. Mm-hmm. They kept staying high. In the afternoon, they kept staying high. He'd leave work late. His stress levels are pretty high when he's coming back home. And consequently, there were a lot of compensatory behaviors on the back of that. All I did with him in the week, was suggest to him that he takes a 15-minute break at lunchtime without his phone. Now, he was super lucky because very near his office, there was a river, right? So he had a bit of nature. So all this guy does at lunchtime, phone goes in the drawer, he walks for 15 minutes around a river and comes back. Now, we did that for a couple of weeks. We re-put the tracking devices on him. Objectively, huge difference. Stress levels, again, mounting up in the morning, but at lunchtime, they almost reset back to normal, okay? So he's, again, starting off the afternoon very far away from his stress threshold, to use my initial analogy. In the afternoon, they're not going up anywhere near as high as they did before, and that's impacting his behaviors in the evening. So objectively, we've seen a difference. That's important, but not as important as his own subjective experience, at least not to me. What did he feel? He says, Doc, I've got more energy. I'm more productive in the afternoon. I'm actually finishing work early now, and he's not drinking as much, and he feels closer with his wife, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that may sound super, super trivial. Oh, what, go for a walk? Yeah, I've heard that before. No, go for an intentional walk at lunchtime without your phone. I guarantee if you do that for 7 days in a row, you will start to feel a difference.
If you enjoyed that conversation, I think you are really going to enjoy the one I had with the former monk, Jay Shetty, on the simple things that you can do to train your mind. It's right there. Give it a listen and let me know what you think.
The monk mindset is about pursuing your truest goals, your truest self, and your most authentic, aligned goals.